Hi everyone, hi fifth graders, Miss Shames here and happy Friday. I'm here to do Read Aloud with you and we're going to continue reading The Hunger Games, the first book in the series, and we're in chapter 1. I think it's really exciting to have this as our last read aloud of the school year. It's going to be really exciting. So our teaching point for today is that readers of fantasy think about the implications of the setting. They think about concepts of power, internal and external problems the characters face, and life lessons or themes that the readers and characters can learn. So to recap from where we were last time, I thought I would just reread the jots that I took last time. And that's always a good habit of readers. You can always reread little notes or jots that you took in your past reading to kind of jolt your memory and jolt your thinking. So we learned that there's the narrator. We find out her name is Katniss. She takes care of her little sister. Prim is her little sister. She loves connecting with others, and that's an inference I made because, she really likes being around her cat and around her family. The mom was apparently once beautiful and does care for her children. I've been noticing that a social issue that's coming up is poverty. The narrator was worried about having a cat because it was another mouth to feed. Prim gave the narrator a gift of like a little bit of food, which isn't a normal gift for young children to give each other. They said that they were lucky if they got 2 to 3 hours of electricity in the evening. And hunger seems to be a common problem that characters face in this story. We also started to learn a little bit about a character relationship. So the narrator seemed to have a strong relationship with her father, who is now deceased. He took a risk to give the narrator a bow and arrow. We have learned that the setting of this story is in what's called District 12, which appears to be like a dark, grim, hungry, and there are people in power who are very controlling of the people who live there. The people who live there can't afford many things, and there was a woods nearby where it was illegal to go, but Katniss and her friend Gail seemed to be sneaking in there. The people in charge of the whole place that they're living, the whole setting, appear to be very cruel. So we meet Gail, who is a friend of Katniss. We found a similarity between them was that they both had gray eyes, and that showed that both of their families were coal miners or coal workers. We find out that Katniss holds some anger towards her mother, and she felt that her mother wasn't really there for her children when she needed to be. And Katniss says that she's trying to forgive her, but she doesn't really feel like she's the forgiving type. And we've learned that the problem is developing because the district appears to be reading off some names, and we don't totally know what this means yet, but we do know that it sounds scary. And Gail, who is Katniss's friend, wants to leave. He's like, let's get out of District 12. So let's keep going and find out what happens.
The woods, then in the district. You can see is the woman who sat by, blank and unreachable, while her children turned to skin and bones. I try to forgive her for my father's sake, but to be honest, I'm not the forgiving type.
This is rereading the end that we read
Gail
last
spreads
time.
the bread slices with the soft goat cheese, carefully placing a basil leaf on each, while I strip the bushes of their berries. We settle back in a nook in the rocks. From this place, we are invisible, but have a clear view of the valley, which is teeming with summer life. Greens to gather, roots to dig, fish iridescent in the sunlight. The day is glorious, with a blue sky and a soft breeze. The food's wonderful, with the cheese seeping into the warm bread and the berries bursting in our mouths. Everything would be perfect if this really was a holiday, if all the day off meant was roaming the mountains with Gail, hunting for tonight's supper. But instead, we have to be standing in the square at 2 o'clock, waiting for the names to be called out. We could do it, Gail says quietly. What? I ask. Leave the district? Run off? Live in the woods? You and I, we could make it, says Gail. I don't know how to respond. The idea is so preposterous. If we didn't have so many kids, he adds quickly. They're not our kids, of course, but they might as well be. Gail's 2 little brothers and a sister, Prim. And you may as well throw in our mothers, too, because how would they live without us? Who would fill those mouths that are always asking for more? With both of us hunting daily, there are still nights when game has to be swapped for lard or shoelaces or wool. Still nights when we go to bed with our stomachs growling. I never want to have kids, I say. I might, if I didn't live here, says Gail. But you do, I say, irritated. Forget it, he snaps back. The conversation feels all wrong. Leave? How could I leave Prim, who is the only person in the world I'm certain I love? And Gail is devoted to his family. We can't leave, so why bother talking about it? And even if we did, where did this stuff about having kids come from? There's never been anything romantic between Gail and me. When we met, I was a skinny 12-year-old, and although he was only 2 years older, he already looked like a man. It took a long time for us to even become friends, to stop haggling over every trade and begin helping each other out. Besides, if he wants kids, Gail won't have any trouble finding a wife. He's good looking, got strong enough to handle the work in the mines, and he can hunt. You can tell by the way the girls whisper about him when he walks by in school that they want him. It makes me jealous, but not for the reason people would think. Good hunting partners are hard to find.
So, wow, in this section, we learned a lot about Katniss's relationship with Gail. And good fiction readers or fantasy readers really want to think about character relationships. So we learned that Katniss really values Gail as a friend. And we noticed that she wouldn't want anything romantic to happen between them and is a little jealous when other girls like him, but really just because she didn't want to lose him as a hunting partner. So that's altogether really showing how much Katniss values Gail as a friend, and that's really strong.
What do you want to do? I ask. We can hunt, fish, or gather? Let's fish at the lake. We can leave our poles and gather in the woods. Get something for tonight, he says. Tonight. After the reaping, everyone is supposed to celebrate, and a lot of people do, out of relief that their children have been spared for another year. But at least 2 families will pull their shutters, lock their doors, and try to figure out how they will survive the painful weeks to come. We will make out well. We make out well. The predators ignore us a day when easier, tastier prey abounds. By late morning, we have a dozen fish, a bag of greens, and best of all, a gallon of strawberries. I found the patch a few years ago, but Gail had the idea to string mesh nets around it to keep out the animals. On the way home, we swing by the Hob, the black market that operates in an abandoned warehouse that once held coal. When they came up with a more efficient system that transported the coal directly from the mines to the trains, the Hob gradually took over the space. Most businesses are closed by this time on reaping day, but the black market's still fairly busy. We easily trade 6 of the fish for good bread, the other 2 for salt. Greasy Say, the bony old woman who sells the bowl of hot soup from a large kettle, takes half the greens off our hands in exchange for a couple of chunks of paraffin. We might do a tad better elsewhere, but we make an effort to keep on good terms with Greasy Say. She's the only one who can consistently be counted on to buy wild dog. We don't hunt them on purpose, but if you're attacked and you take out a dog or 2, well, meat is meat. Once it's in the soup, I'll call it beef, Greasy Say says with a wink. No one in the scene would turn up their nose at a good leg of wild dog, but the peacekeepers who come into the Hob can afford to be a little choosier. When we finish our business at the market...
So I feel like our understanding of the problem has been deepening a lot, like this overall problem. So we've been learning more and more about how hunger affects the people in District 12. Katniss explained how both her and Gail's mothers depend on their children to get food for them, and how the mothers are generally hungry, and how the kids are generally hungry, the ones hunting. They also accept dog meat as regular food, and I'm guessing this is probably out of desperation. They're really hungry. So they put it in their soup and they call it beef. We've also learned that something dreadful happens each year when names are called, and a few families are in distress because of it, because their children's names have been called, but everyone else is relieved and celebrating. And I've noticed the author is kind of like revealing the details of this, of what's called the reaping, very slowly. And I think the author's doing that kind of on purpose. Like, it's their craft. They're trying to like build up some mystery, build up some suspense, so that eventually we'll figure out what is this whole calling names actually about.
We go to the back door of the mayor's house to sell half the strawberries, knowing he has a particular fondness for them and can afford our price. The mayor's daughter, Madge, opens the door. She's in my year at school. Being the mayor's daughter, you'd expect her to be a snob, but she's all right. She just keeps to herself, like me. Since neither of us really has a group of friends, we seem to end up together a lot at school, eating lunch, sitting next to each other at assemblies, partnering for sports activities. We rarely talk, which suits us both just fine. Today, her drab school outfit has been replaced by an expensive white dress, and her blonde hair is done up with a pink ribbon. Reaping clothes. Pretty dress, says Gail. Madge shoots him a look, trying to see if it's a genuine compliment or if he's just being ironic. It is a pretty dress, but she would never be wearing it ordinarily. She presses her lips together and then smiles. Well, if I end up going to the Capitol, I want to look nice, don't I? Now it's Gail's turn to be confused. Does she mean it, or is she messing with him? I'm guessing the second. You won't be going to the Capitol, says Gail coolly. His eyes land on a small, circular pin that adorns her dress. Real gold, beautifully crafted. It could keep a family in bread for months. What can you have? 5 entries? I had 6 when I was just 12 years old. That's not her fault, I say. No, it's no one's fault, just the way it is, says Gail. Madge's face has become closed off. She puts the money for the berries in my hand. Good luck, Katniss. You too, I say, and the door closes. We walk toward the seam in silence. I don't like that Gail took a dig at Madge, but he's right, of course. The reaping system is unfair, with the poor getting the worst of it. You become eligible for the reaping the day you turn 12. That year, your name is entered once. At 13, twice, and so on, until you reach the age of 18, the final year of eligibility, when your name goes into the pool 7 times. That's true for every citizen in all 12 districts in the entire country of Panem. But here's the catch. Say you're poor and starving as we were, you can opt to add your name more times in exchange for tesserae. Each tessera is worth a meager year's supply of grain and oil for one person. You may do this for each of your family members as well. So at the age of 12, I had my name entered 4 times. Once because I had to, and 3 times for tesserae for grain and oil for myself, Prim, and my mother. In fact, every year I've needed to do this, and the entries are cumulative. So now, at the age of 16, my name will be in the reaping 20 times. Gail, who is 18 and has been either helping or single-handedly feeding a family of 5 for 7 years, will have his name in 42 times. You can see why someone like Madge, who has never been at risk of needing a tessera, can set him off.
So I feel like in this last part, we learned a lot more about the implications of the setting. When I say implications of the setting, I'm saying, like, how does the setting affect the characters and the plot of the story? So we're learning that it's in the country of Panem. In Panem, there is lots of poverty. People are poor. There are some people in power who are putting the citizens at risk. And people are so hungry and desperately poor that they're increasing their risk for a little bit of extra food. So we heard them say, like, they could enter their names more times into the reaping, whatever that is, where their name gets chosen, and we can infer that something bad happens if their name gets chosen. But they can put their name in more times for a little extra food. So really the only people who would do that and make that decision are people who are very desperate for food. But then what I found was interesting in this last part is that there's a lot of inequality in this country. So it's not everyone who is starving. It's not everyone who's poor. So it's creating a lot of like tension and anger and resentment between the different groups, because there are people suffering, and then they're looking around and they're seeing, like this character Madge, not everyone is suffering in the same way.
The chance of her name being drawn is very slim compared to those of us who live in the scene. Not possible, but slim. And even though the rules were set up by the capital, not the districts, certainly not Madge's family, it's hard not to resent those who don't have to sign up for Tesserae. Gail knows his anger at Madge is misdirected. On other days, deep in the woods, I've listened to him rant about how Tesserae are just another tool to cause misery in our district, a way to plant hatred between starving workers of the seam and those who generally count on supper, and thereby will ensure we will never trust one another. It's to the capital's advantage to have us divided among ourselves, he might say, if there were no ears to hear but mine. If it wasn't reaping day, if a girl with a gold pin and no Tesserae had not made what I'm sure she thought was a harmless comment. As we walk, I glance over at Gail's face, still smoldering underneath his stony expression. His rages seem pointless to me, although I never say so. It's not that I don't agree with him, I do, but what good is yelling about the capital in the middle of the woods? It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make things fair. It doesn't fill our stomachs. In fact, it scares off the nearby game. I let him yell, though. Better he does it in the woods than in the district. Gail and I divide our spoils, leaving 2 fish, a couple of loaves of bread, greens, a quart of strawberries, salt, paraffin, and a bit of money for each. See you in the square, I say. Wear something pretty, he says flatly. At home.
I've realized in this part, we learned a lot about power in this story and who has power. So we're learning about that there's these horrible people who are in the capital, that they've kind of set all the rules, they've decided things, but then this is very different than the people in the districts who are kind of at the mercy of the people's rules in the capital. A lot of the people in the districts don't have a lot of food or money, but then it seems like there are some people who are not in the capital but also not starving, and they do have money and have food, and while they don't have the power necessarily to make rules, they do have power in their money and in their food. That food and money give them some power. And they're not like working in the mine like Katniss's family and Glenn's family. So there's different levels, multiple different levels of power in this story. So one question that you guys are going to be answering for your short response today, I want you to think about this middle jot that I have about the setting. And I want you to think about what effect does the setting have on the characters and plot of the story. So I can't wait to see what you guys write. Happy Friday, everybody.